I thought the worst part of crying on the subway was that everyone could see me. I was wrong. The worst part was that almost no one cared. The last train out of Manhattan rattled through the tunnel like it was carrying every broken thing in New York, and did not want to know any of our names. Fluorescent lights flickered above me. The window across from my seat showed only my reflection, pale skin, wet hair stuck to my cheeks, mascara I had tried to wipe away with the sleeve of my coat, and eyes so red I barely recognized myself. My name was Ava Collins, 24 years old. Waitress at Westbridge Bistro until 43 minutes ago. Big sister to Sophie Collins, 15, brilliant, stubborn, and still young enough to believe me when I said things like we will figure it out. In my bag, folded between my work apron and a crushed granola bar, was the envelope Derek Walsh had handed me in the back office while the dinner rush kept laughing on the other side of the kitchen doors. Termination notice. Final review pending. Alleged cash theft. Alleged. Such a clean word for being destroyed by a lie. My last paycheck was being held until the investigation ended, which meant rent was not getting paid, Sophie's school trip was not happening, and the little apartment in Queens that already smelled like radiator dust and cheap soap might not be ours much longer. I pressed the envelope against my lap with both hands, as if holding it still could keep my life from falling apart. Across the aisle, a man in a Yankees cap glanced at me, then looked away. A woman with headphones stared at her phone. A teenager filmed his shoes. Nobody said anything. That was the mercy and the cruelty of the subway. You could fall apart in public, and the city would give you privacy by pretending you were not real. The train screeched into the next station, doors sliding open with a tired gasp. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain, metal, and wet wool. An older woman stepped on, holding a grocery bag to her chest, her knees stiff as she searched for a seat. Every seat near her stayed occupied. I looked down at my aching feet, still sore from a 12-hour shift, and for one selfish second I wanted to stay invisible. Then I heard my mother's voice in memory, soft and firm from years before illness made her quiet. Pain does not excuse you from being kind, Ava. I stood. My legs trembled, but I stood. Ma'am, you can sit here, I said. The woman blinked at me, then smiled like I had handed her something heavier than a seat. Thank you, sweetheart. Sweetheart. The word nearly broke me. I moved toward the end of the car and grabbed the metal pole, turning my face toward the black window so no one would see the fresh tears. That was when I noticed him. A man sat alone near the last doors, dressed in a black overcoat that looked too expensive for the subway and too still for a normal passenger. He had pale skin, dark hair combed back, sharp features, and eyes that did not slide away when they met mine. He was not staring the way men sometimes did. He was watching like he had seen the exact moment I chose kindness over collapse, and it had made him stop breathing. I looked away first. My stop was still 6 stations away. I told myself not to be afraid. But when the train lurched forward and the lights flickered again, I saw his reflection in the glass, rising slowly from his seat and walking toward me. The man in the black overcoat did not rush toward me, and somehow that made him more frightening. New York teaches women to fear speed, but it also teaches us to fear stillness. He moved with the calm of someone who had never needed permission from a room, one hand holding the silver rail as the train swayed, his eyes steady on mine through every flicker of the lights. I tightened my grip on the pole and looked toward the older woman in my seat, then toward the doors, then anywhere except him. There were other people in the car. That should have made me feel safer. It did not. The man stopped beside the empty stretch of bench near me, leaving enough space that I could breathe. Then he sat down. Not close. Not far. Exactly the kind of distance that said he understood fear and had decided not to add to mine. For 3 stops he said nothing. The train roared under the East River metal, screaming against metal, and my reflection trembled in the black window. I tried to wipe my face with my sleeve, but the fabric was damp from rain. That was when a white handkerchief appeared on the seat between us. Folded. Clean. Expensive in the quiet way some things are expensive because they have never had to prove it. I stared at it. I do not take things from strangers, I said. My voice sounded rough, smaller than I wanted. He looked ahead, not at me, as if giving me the dignity of not being watched while I decided whether to fall apart. Then do not take it from a stranger. His voice was low, controlled, with the faint Italian-American shape of Brooklyn underneath. Take it from someone who knows what it feels like when the city pretends not to see. I should have ignored him. I should have stepped toward the next car, stood near the doors, called Sophie just to hear another voice. Instead, I looked at the handkerchief until my eyes burned again. You do not know anything about me. No, he said. But I know you gave up your seat when you could barely stand. I laughed once, but it came out broken. That is not special. It is when you are hurting. The train lights flickered again, briefly cutting his face into shadow and pale angles. He was older than me by more than a decade, maybe 35, with dark hair combed back from a sharp face and eyes so still they made lying feel pointless. His coat was black wool, tailored perfectly. His shoes were polished despite the rain. Nothing about him belonged on the midnight subway, and yet he sat there like the train had been waiting for him. Who made you cry? He asked. My stomach tightened around Derek Walsh's name, around the envelope in my bag, around the word alleged printed so cleanly, it might as well have been carved into my skin. No one. He turned his head then. Not much. Just enough that I felt the full weight of his attention. That is the first lie you have told me. It is also the last conversation we are having. Fair. He looked away again, and for some reason that unsettled me more than if he had pushed. Men usually mistook refusal for a challenge. This one treated it like a door. Closed but still respected. The train slowed at Court Square, brakes whining, doors opening to a platform nearly empty except for a man sleeping under a red scarf and two nurses in blue scrubs. The older woman I had given my seat to rose carefully. Before she stepped off, she touched my arm and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart." I nodded and the tears came back so fast I had to turn toward the window. The handkerchief still waited beside me. I picked it up with 2 fingers, angry at myself for needing it. Angrier at the city for making need feel shameful. It smelled faintly of soap and cold air. I am not asking for pity, I said. Good, he answered. I do not offer it. That made me look at him again. Then what are you offering? He glanced at the envelope sticking out of my bag just enough to show the Westbridge Bistro logo. His eyes changed, sharpening quietly. Attention, he said. The next station announcement crackled overhead, almost swallowing the word. But I heard it. Attention. Not comfort. Not rescue. Not promises. Just the one thing nobody else on that train had given me. When I stood for my stop, the envelope slipped from my bag and landed between us. He did not reach for it until I did. Our hands almost met over the paper, but he pulled back first, letting me take it. His restraint scared me more than power would have. As the doors opened, he spoke behind me. Ava Collins. I froze. He had read the name on the envelope. You should be careful with people who learn names too quickly, I said. His answer followed me onto the platform, quiet as the closing doors. You should be careful with people who made you believe no one would. The platform smelled like wet concrete, brake dust, and old coffee someone had spilled hours earlier. I stood there with the termination envelope pressed against my chest while the train pulled away, taking the man in the black overcoat with it, or at least that was what I told myself. The red taillights vanished into the tunnel. The tracks hummed for a few seconds after, like the city was still thinking about what had happened. Ava Collins. He had said my name as if it belonged somewhere more important than a folded paper full of lies. I should have thrown away the handkerchief. I should have left it on the train seat or dropped it into the nearest trash can before it became proof that a stranger had seen me too clearly. Instead, I held it in my fist all the way up the stairs to Queensboro Plaza, past the tired commuters, past the dripping advertisements, past the man selling roses from a plastic bucket even though it was almost midnight and nobody looked like they believed in romance anymore. Rain waited above ground. Thin, cold, needling rain that slid under my collar and made the city lights bleed across the sidewalk. My apartment was 12 blocks away, but I walked because a cab was impossible and the bus would take too long. Every step made my feet ache. Every window I passed reflected a girl who looked smaller than she had that morning. I kept hearing Derek Walsh in my head, calm and disappointed, as if he had not just ruined my life with a signature. Ava, the register was short. Ava, you were the last one near the cash drawer. Ava, this will be easier if you cooperate. Cooperate. Another clean word. It meant confess to something I did not do so he could close the file before anyone opened the real one. By the time I reached our building, my hands were numb. The hallway smelled like radiator heat, damp coats, and the lemon cleaner Mrs. Patel used on the stairs every Sunday. I unlocked the apartment quietly because Sophie had school in the morning, and because I could not bear the thought of her waking up to my face before I knew how to lie with it. The living room lamp was still on. Sophie was asleep on the couch with her chemistry textbook open on her lap, one sock half off, dark blonde hair falling across her cheek. 15 years old and already trying not to need too much from me. On the coffee table was a folded note in her handwriting. "Are we going to be okay?" I sat down beside the couch so slowly my knees barely made a sound. That question broke me harder than the envelope had. Because Derek had not just taken my job. He had taken my answer. I touched the edge of Sophie's blanket and whispered yes, even though the room knew I was lying. My phone buzzed before I could cry again. Unknown number. My whole body went still. For one foolish second, I thought of the man from the train. Then I opened the message. It was from Derek. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Come sign the statement if you want any chance of receiving partial final pay. Do not make this harder than it has to be." I read it twice, then a third time until the word stopped looking like English and started looking like a door closing. Partial final pay. He was offering me crumbs in exchange for my name. I set the phone face down and pulled the handkerchief from my coat pocket. White cotton, folded wrong now from my grip, embroidered at one corner with 2 letters in dark thread. LR. Not a stranger after all. A man with initials. A man with manners. A man who asked who made me cry and did not call it pity. I hated that I wondered who he was. I hated that I remembered the way the whole train seemed to grow quieter around him. Across the city, though I did not know it yet, Luca Romano stepped into a black car outside the next station, handed his driver a single instruction, and stared out at the wet Manhattan streets with my name still in his mouth. "Westbridge Bistro," he said. "Find out why a girl who gives up her seat on the worst night of her life is being accused of stealing what she was too proud to ask for." Morning came too fast, pale and cold through the thin curtains, turning our apartment into a place where every unpaid bill looked more awake than I was. I had slept maybe 2 hours on the floor beside the couch because I did not want Sophie to wake up alone if the world decided to get worse before sunrise. She found me there at 7, still in yesterday's clothes, the white handkerchief folded in my lap, the termination envelope on the coffee table like a verdict waiting for breakfast. "Ava," she said softly. "Not what happened. Not are you okay. Just my name, careful and scared." I sat up too quickly and the room tilted. "I am fine." Sophie looked at the envelope, then at me, and I watched childhood lose another inch from her face. "You are not." That almost undid me. 15-year-old girls should worry about chemistry quizzes, not rent, not whether their sister's eyes are swollen from crying on a subway, not how many ways adults can lie and still call it policy. I made toast because making toast was easier than explaining ruin. I spread peanut butter thin enough to see the bread through it and told her to eat before school. She did not move. "Did they fire you?" My hand froze on the knife. The radiator hissed in the corner. A siren passed 3 streets away. I wanted to protect her with a lie, but lies were what had brought me here. "They accused me of taking money from the register," I said. Sophie's face changed instantly. "You would never." 3 words. No hesitation. No investigation. No folded envelope required. Just faith, clean and immediate from the only person who could not afford to lose it. My throat burned. "I know." Then why would they say that? Because Derek needed someone small enough to blame. Because I worked late shifts. Because I counted tips and quarters. Because people believe poverty is a motive before they believe power is. I did not say any of that. I only touched her shoulder and said, "I am going to fix it." At 9 o'clock, I stood outside Westbridge Bistro with my work shoes still damp from the night before and Luca Romano's handkerchief tucked inside my coat pocket like a secret I had not earned. The restaurant looked elegant in daylight, all polished brass, white curtains and little potted trees by the door. The kind of place where customers paid $18 for soup and still complained if the spoon had water spots. Inside, Derek Walsh waited at a corner table with a folder and a pen. He wore a navy vest, a clean white shirt, and the calm expression of a man who had already decided how my story ended. "Ava," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "thank you for coming in." I stayed standing. I want my final paycheck. And I want this resolved quietly. He opened the folder and turned a paper toward me. Statement of responsibility. Agreement not to contest. Partial wage release upon signature. The words lined up like polished knives, but there was no blood in the room, only paper, and somehow that made it feel colder. I did not take anything. Derek sighed, disappointed in the way people sound when they are tired of your innocence inconveniencing them. The register was short. You were assigned to that drawer. The camera system had an issue, unfortunately, so we have to rely on shift records. An issue. Technical problems happen. His eyes did not blink enough. I thought of the handkerchief. I thought of the stranger on the train saying attention. I thought of Sophie saying you would never. My fingers curled around the back of the chair, but I did not sit. Then show me the records. Derek's smile thinned. Ava, do not make this harder. For who? The silence after my question was small, but it had teeth. Before he could answer, the front door opened behind me. Cold morning air moved through the restaurant, carrying rain and city noise. Derek looked past my shoulder, and for the first time since I had known him, uncertainty crossed his face. I turned. Luca Romano stood just inside the doorway in his black overcoat, pale and still beneath the warm restaurant lights, with a woman in a gray suit beside him carrying a leather folder. His eyes met mine first, not Derek's, asking without words if I wanted him to step closer. I should have been angry that he came. I should have been afraid that he had found me. Instead, for one breath, all I felt was the strange relief of not being the only person in the room who knew I was telling the truth. Luca did not enter the restaurant like a man looking for a fight. He entered like a man who had already read the ending, and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. The woman in the gray suit walked beside him with quiet purpose, her leather folder held against her chest, her eyes moving once across the dining room, the register, the ceiling cameras, and Derek's face. I had waited tables at Westbridge Bistro long enough to know the difference between customers who mattered and customers who only thought they did. Luca Romano mattered in a way that made silverware seem quieter. Derek rose halfway from his chair, then seemed to remember his own authority, and sat back down. Mr. Romano, he said, his voice polished but thinner than before. I was not aware we had an appointment. Luca looked at me again before answering him. We do not. The woman in gray stepped forward. My name is Grace Miller. I am an employment attorney. Miss Collins has not retained me yet, but she has the right to be informed before signing any document that affects wages, reputation, or future employment.
Ist daher.
Retained. Informed. Rights. Words from a world where people did not apologize for asking questions. Derek's smile stiffened. This is an internal matter. Grace placed her folder on the table. Then you will not mind explaining it clearly. I should have felt relieved. Instead, shame rose hot under my skin, stupid and familiar. There were linen napkins folded like fans on nearby tables. Water glasses polished until they disappeared. A restaurant full of beauty built on tips, tired feet, and people like me staying quiet. I looked at the statement Derek wanted me to sign. My name sat at the bottom of the page, waiting to be used against me. I did not ask him to come, I said, because I needed that clear. To Derek. To Grace. To myself. Luca's voice stayed calm. No, I turned toward him. Then why are you here? For the first time, something almost human moved across his face. Not softness. Not pity. Something closer to restraint under pressure. Because last night you cried in a train car full of people, and none of them asked why. The words landed gently, but they shook something loose in me. Derek scoffed. This is absurd. Grace opened the folder. What is absurd is claiming the camera system failed at the exact time the register shortage occurred, while the cloud backup shows the footage remained active. Derek stopped breathing for half a second. I saw it. Luca saw it. Grace definitely saw it. She removed a printed still from the folder and turned it toward Derek, not toward me. I did not need to see it yet. I saw the truth first on his face. Where did you get that? He asked. From the backup system your corporate office forgot to restrict, Grace said. The copy is time-stamped. Derek's hand moved toward the statement, but Luca's gaze shifted to it, and Derek let his hand fall back. Nosrets. No raised voices. Just attention, sharpened into consequence. Grace continued. The footage shows Miss Collins leaving the register at 11:23 to deliver orders to table 6. It then shows you opening the drawer at 11:27. My pulse thudded so hard the room blurred at the edges. I gripped the back of the chair. You knew, I whispered. Derek looked at me then and I expected anger. What I saw was worse. Annoyance. As if my innocence had become inconvenient paperwork. Ava, this is being taken out of context. Luca finally stepped closer but not to Derek. To me. Still leaving space. Still asking without asking. Do you want to sit? I shook my head. If I sat, I might never stand up again. Grace slid another page across the table. There are also wage holds from 3 former employees after similar accusations. 2 never received final pay. 1 signed a statement nearly identical to this. She tapped the paper Derek had given me. Pattern matters. Pattern. That word turned my private humiliation into something larger. I was not foolish. I was selected. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it steadied me. Derek had not chosen me because I looked guilty. He chose me because I looked alone. I picked up the pen from the table and placed it carefully on top of the unsigned statement. I am not signing. My voice shook. It still counted. Derek's eyes narrowed. Then your pay remains under review. Grace smiled without warmth. Actually, it does not. Luca looked at Derek then fully and the air in the room changed. You chose her because you thought no one would come, he said quietly. That was your mistake. For the first time since I walked into Westbridge Bistro, I felt the lie step back from my name. Grace Miller did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The quietest people in that room were the ones with the most dangerous things in their hands, and hers was not a weapon. It was a folder. Cream-colored. Neatly tapped. Full of paper that had somehow become louder than Derek Walsh ever was. She placed the first page in front of him, then the second, then the third, each one landing on the white tablecloth with a soft sound that made my pulse beat harder. This is the cloud backup from Monday night, she said. This is the register access report. This is the staffing schedule you edited after the shortage was reported. And this is the payroll hold notice you sent before any formal review was completed. Derek's face had changed from polite confidence to something tighter and duller, like a mask being held in place by both hands. You cannot just walk into my restaurant and accuse me based on documents you do not understand. Grace looked at him for one calm second. I understand them very well. Luca stood near the end of the table, hands loose at his sides, black overcoat still damp from the rain outside. He had not interrupted once. That should have made him seem less powerful. Did the opposite. He watched the room the way I imagine men like him watch storms, not afraid of them, only interested in where they would break. I hated that part of me felt safer because he was there. Safety from a man like Luca Romano felt like standing near a locked door and realizing he had the only key, then realizing he was not using it to trap me. Grace turned another page. There is more, Miss Collins. My name in her voice did not sound like an accusation. It sounded like evidence that I existed. The footage shows Mr. Walsh removing cash from the register during your shift. The timestamp matches the reported shortage. There are also 2 prior incidents involving different employees, both followed by wage holds and pressure to sign statements. My hands went cold. So he has done this before. Derek leaned forward. Careful, Ava. Luca's eyes moved to him. Nothing else. Just his eyes. Derek sat back. I felt the shift in the room like a train slowing before a station. For months, maybe years, Derek had relied on people being too tired, too scared, too broke to challenge the story he wrote for them. But now his story had witnesses. It had timestamps. It had copies. It had a woman in a gray suit who knew exactly which laws fit around each lie. Grace slid a new document toward me, not Derek. This confirms that you are declining to sign any admission of wrongdoing. It also requests immediate release of withheld wages and preservation of all records related to the incident. You do not have to sign it now. You can review it first. I stared at the page. Review. Not obey. Not confess. Review. Such a small word. Such a different world. Will I get my paycheck? I asked, hating how small the question sounded and how large it was inside my life. Grace's expression softened. We will push for full release. Based on what we have, holding it is difficult for them to justify. Derek exhaled sharply. This is ridiculous. She is a waitress, not some corporate client. There it was. The truth underneath the suit. The reason he chose me. Not because I had done anything wrong. Because he thought being a waitress meant my name was cheaper to damage. Something inside me stopped shaking. I picked up the document Grace had offered. My fingers were still cold, but they were steady enough. I am a waitress, I said. That does not make me disposable. Luca looked at me then. Not proud in a way that claimed credit. Not surprised in a way that insulted me. Just still. As if the train from last night had finally reached the station he had been waiting for. Grace gathered the unsigned confession Derek had prepared and placed it inside her folder. This document will not be signed, she said. Any attempt to use it, or to describe Miss Collins as having admitted responsibility, will create additional problems. Derek looked at Luca. And what exactly is your role in this? Luca's answer came quietly. I saw her crying. Derek gave a bitter laugh. That is your legal standing? No, Luca said. That is why I cared. Miss Miller is the legal standing. The room went silent again, but this time it did not crush me. It held me up. Outside, rain tapped against the restaurant windows, soft and patient. Inside, the lie that had followed me from the back office to the subway to my sister's sleeping face began to lose its shape. I was not cleared yet. I was not safe yet. But for the first time since Derek handed me that envelope, I was not alone with the truth. By noon, Westbridge Bistro had stopped pretending to be open for lunch. The front door was locked. The white curtains were drawn halfway across the windows. Outside, New York moved on without caring that my life was being rearranged one document at a time. Taxis splashing through shallow rainwater, delivery bikes cutting through traffic, strangers hurrying under black umbrellas. Inside, the restaurant smelled like lemon polish, cold espresso, and the kind of expensive silence that used to make me feel grateful to be allowed near it. Derek sat at the same corner table, but he looked different now. Smaller, somehow, without the power of my fear surrounding him. Grace had made 3 calls. One to the restaurant owner, who was apparently not as unreachable as Derek always claimed. One to a payroll office. One to someone from the city labor department who spoke so calmly over speakerphone that Derek stopped interrupting after the second sentence. I stood near the bar with my coat still on, Luca a few feet away, not close enough to corner me, not far enough to abandon me. That careful distance had become its own language. I hated that I understood it. I hated more that I trusted it a little. Grace placed a fresh document in front of Derek. This confirms Miss Collins is not admitting wrongdoing, that the accusation is withdrawn pending formal review, and that her final wages will be released by end of business today. Derek stared at the page. You are making this sound very simple. Grace's voice stayed even. It is simple. You accused an employee without preserving evidence, withheld wages without proper basis, and attempted to secure a statement that could damage her future employment. I was protecting the restaurant. Luca spoke for the first time in several minutes. You were protecting yourself. The words did not hit the room loudly. They landed softly, and that made them harder to escape. Derek's eyes shifted to him. You do not know anything about this business. Luca's expression did not change. I know when a man chooses the person least able to fight back. My chest tightened. Not because I needed Luca to say it, but because some part of me had needed someone to say it out. Loud where Derek could hear. The woman from payroll arrived 20 minutes later, red-faced and breathless, carrying a laptop and a folder. She would not meet Derek's eyes. Numbers appeared on the screen. Hours worked. Tips reported. Wages held. The final amount was not huge to people who ordered wine by the bottle, but to me it looked like rent, groceries, Sophie's school trip, and one night of sleep without counting the ceiling cracks. When the payroll woman confirmed the transfer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Deposit pending. I stared at those 2 words until they blurred. Deposit pending. Not salvation. Not magic. Just money I had earned and should never have had to beg for. Grace slid another paper toward me. This is a written correction for your employment record. Read it first. Sign only if you want to acknowledge receipt. I read every line because no one rushed me. No one sighed. No one called me difficult. My name sat there, no longer attached to theft, no longer bent under Derek's version of the truth. Ava Collins. No admission of wrongdoing. Wages released. Allegation withdrawn. My hands shook when I signed, but they signed my own freedom, not a lie. Derek looked at me then, and for 1 second I saw the anger under his embarrassment. The old fear tried to rise. Luca noticed before I did. He did not move toward Derek. He only said, "There will be no contact outside the legal process." Derek looked away first. That was when I finally breathed. Outside the restaurant, the rain had stopped. Grace gave me her card and told me to call if anyone pressured me again. Luca waited by the curb, the black car behind him, his handkerchief still folded in my coat pocket. "You did not have to do all this," I said. "No," he answered. But he should not have done what made it necessary. I looked at him, really looked, and the man from the train seemed both more dangerous and less impossible than before. Why me? His gaze moved to the subway entrance down the block, where people disappeared underground carrying coffee, flowers, briefcases, lives. "Because you were crying," he said, and still made room for someone else to sit. The street outside Westbridge Bistro looked washed clean, but I did not feel clean. I felt exposed. People passed around us with shopping bags and umbrellas, stepping over puddles, checking phones, buying coffee, living ordinary lives that had not been interrupted by a stranger in a black overcoat and a folder full of truth. Luca stood near the curb beside the black car. His hands relaxed at his sides, the city moving around him like water around stone. Grace had gone back inside to finish speaking with payroll, leaving me alone with the man who had turned one subway ride into the beginning of a legal storm. My phone buzzed again. Deposit pending. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Rent. Groceries. Sophie's school trip. A small amount of air returning to a room I had been suffocating in. I should have thanked him. Instead, I felt anger rise because gratitude was dangerous when you did not understand the price. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Luca looked at me like he had expected the question, maybe even respected it. "Nothing. People like you do not do nothing." "People like me?" His voice stayed even. Men with cars waiting at curbs. Men who can find cloud footage overnight. Men who walk into restaurants with attorneys because a girl cried on a train. I heard my own voice shaking, but I kept going because fear that stays silent turns into debt. "I do not know who you are. I do not know what your world costs. I do not know why you saw me once and decided to make me your problem." The last word hung between us, sharp and unfair. Luca absorbed it without flinching. "You are not my problem." "Then what am I?" For the first time, his control shifted. Not much. Just enough to let me see something tired beneath it. A person the city tried to erase in front of me. A taxi splashed through a puddle near the curb. Cold water sprayed the sidewalk, and neither of us moved. I wanted him to sound possessive so I could reject him cleanly. I wanted him to say something arrogant, something that would make this simple. But Luca Romano kept doing the one thing I did not know how to fight. He kept giving me room. "I am not here to own your gratitude," he said. "I am not here to turn your relief into a contract. You owe me nothing, Ava Collins." Hearing my full name in his voice felt different now. Less like being found, more like being returned to myself. "Then why stay?" I whispered. His gaze moved toward the subway entrance down the block, where people were disappearing underground again, swallowed by tile, steel, and routine. "Because last night everyone saw you crying and treated your pain like background noise." He looked back at me. "I have done many things I am not proud of, but I know what it means to be ignored until you become useful to someone else. Derek made you useful to his lie. I wanted the truth to be useful to you." The words pressed against something fragile in my chest. I thought of Sophie believing me before anyone else did. I thought of the older woman thanking me for a seat. I thought of the white handkerchief tucked inside my coat pocket, still clean somehow, despite the night it had survived with me. "You scare me," I said. "Good." My eyes lifted. He continued softer. "Fear can be honest. Just do not let it be the only thing that speaks for me." I hated that answer because it did not ask me to stop being careful. It let me stay careful. It let me stay mine. Grace came outside then and handed me a folder with copies of everything. "Call me before you respond to anyone from the restaurant," she said. "And eat something today." The kindness of that almost made me laugh. Almost. When she left, Luca opened the rear door of the black car, then stepped away from it. "This can take you home. Or it can leave empty. Your choice." I looked at the car, then down the stairs to the subway. The city was loud again. Metal horns, footsteps, voices. But this time it did not feel like nobody could hear me. I handed him the handkerchief. "I can get home on my own." He accepted it with a slight nod, no insult, no argument. Then I turned toward the subway stairs with my wages returned, my name cleared, and the strange knowledge that being seen did not have to mean being owned. The subway stairs swallowed me in the middle of the afternoon, and for the first time since the night before I did not feel like I was descending into a place where the city could forget me. The platform smelled the same as always: wet concrete, brake dust, coffee, warm metal, too many lives passing too close together. But I was different. My folder was tucked under my arm. My phone held the proof of my wages coming back. My name was not clean because Luca Romano had made it clean. My name was clean because the truth had finally been allowed to speak. The train arrived with a rush of wind that pushed my hair against my cheeks. I stepped inside and found a seat near the doors. For a moment I just stared at the opposite window, remembering the girl reflected there the night before. Red eyes. Wet coat. A termination envelope held like a sentence. I wanted to reach through time and sit beside her myself. I wanted to tell her she was not weak for crying. She was tired. She was scared. She had carried too much for too long without asking the city to carry any of it back. When I got home, Sophie opened the door before I could use my key. She had skipped her last class, which should have made me angry, but her face was so pale with worry that all I could do was hold up the folder. "They withdrew it," I said. "The accusation. My pay is being released." She stared at me for 1 second, then threw her arms around my waist so hard the folder bent between us. I laughed and cried at the same time, which felt ridiculous and holy. That night we ordered pizza from the cheap place on the corner and ate it sitting on the floor because the couch still had laundry on it. Sophie asked if the man from the subway was a lawyer. I said no. She asked if he was dangerous. I looked at the white handkerchief I had returned, the black car I had refused, the way he had stepped back every time I needed room. "Maybe," I said. "But not to me." The next morning I took the train again. Not because I had work. Westbridge would not be seeing me for a while, maybe ever. I took it because I needed to prove to myself that the subway was still just a subway, not the place where I broke. Dawn softened the tiled walls into pale blue and gray. Commuters stood with coffee cups and blank faces. A musician played violin near the stairs, the notes thin but brave. And there, near the far column, stood Luca in his black overcoat, hands folded in front of him, not blocking my path, not stepping toward me until I saw him. "You came back underground," he said. "So did you." I wanted to return something. He held out the handkerchief, freshly cleaned, folded perfectly, the initials facing up. I looked at it, then at him. "You kept it. You returned it. That is not an answer." "No," he said quietly. "But it is the honest part of one." I took it this time without shame. The train lights appeared in the tunnel, growing larger, brighter, shaking the platform beneath our shoes. "Why did you sit beside me that night?" I asked. Luca looked toward the coming train, and the reflection of its headlights moved across his face like a confession. "Because everyone else saw a woman crying," he said. "I saw someone still kind enough to give up her seat." The doors opened. People moved around us. The city rushed forward, impatient as always. Luca did not ask to come with me. He did not offer the car again. He simply waited. So I stepped into the train, then turned back and held the door with one hand. "Are you getting on?" For the first time, the most feared man I had ever met looked uncertain. Then he stepped inside and stood beside me, not too close, not too far, while the subway carried us under New York. He ruled the city from black cars and locked rooms. But I met him on a subway, where he taught me that being seen can feel like being saved.